Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, President Park Geun-hye nominates Moon Chang-keuk, a former journalist, as the new Prime Minister. She also names Korea's ambassador to Japan as the new head of the nation's spy agency. 15 crew members of the Sewol-ho ferry that sank in April, killing more than 300 people, go on trial on charges ranging from negligence to homicide. Plus, Korean household debt hits a record high of $683 billion. Analysts say the sheer amount of debt is threatening the nation's economic growth momentum. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, June 11th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you are tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning: after a long period of deliberation, President Park Geun-hye has nominated a former journalist to be her new Prime Minister. If approved, Moon Chang-keuk will be tasked with spearheading sweeping government reforms and regaining public trust in the wake of April's ferry disaster. The president also put forward her pick to run the State Intelligence Agency. Choi You-sun starts us off.
On Tuesday, the presidential office announced that Moon Chang-keuk, the former editor-in-chief of the JoongAng Daily and head of the Korea News Editors Association, had been nominated as the new prime minister. The presidential spokesperson said the nominee's integrity as a journalist was highly valued, as the new prime minister will be the one leading government restructuring and instituting sweeping reforms in the aftermath of April's ferry disaster.
With his remarkable insight and driving force, the nominee is expected to push forward with reforms in public service and rooting out wrongful practices in our society.
Tuesday's nomination comes nearly 2 weeks after President Park's first nominee An Dae-hee withdrew amid controversy over his post-retirement earnings. Since An's resignation, the presidential office is known to have tightened the personnel verification process and focused on finding a reform-minded figure with ethical integrity. As for the head of the National Intelligence Service, current ambassador to Japan Lee Byung-gi was named. The career diplomat's working style and deep understanding of intelligence and security at home and abroad were cited in his nomination.
The nominee is considered the right person to fulfill the intelligence agency's duties and carry out reforms amid current tensions between the two Koreas.
Now that a new prime minister nominee has been named, the much-anticipated reshuffles within the cabinet and presidential office are expected to gain momentum and will likely take place after President Park returns from a trip to Central Asia next week. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
Now, following those nominations, President Park is expected to shake up her cabinet and presidential office aides before the week is out. Pundits say the president is aiming to get the reshuffle done and dusted before she travels to Central Asia next week. The major shake-up is part of her drive to reform government in the wake of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. The seats for the finance and education vice ministries are open, while the foreign and unification ministers may be subject to the reshuffle. Political watchers expect at least 20 officials to be chopped and changed under President Park's reshuffling plans. Because of this, experts say it will take quite some time until the president's reform plans are complete. Now, the trial for the captain and the surviving crew members of the sunken Sewol-ho ferry began on Tuesday in the southwestern city of Gwangju. Many of the defendants, including the captain, are accused of abandoning the ferry without any attempt to evacuate the passengers. Connie Kim reports.
The first day of trial for the 15 crew members accused of fleeing the sinking ship focused on whether some, including the captain, would be found guilty of murder by willful negligence. And the rest are charged with negligence that led to the death of hundreds of people.
If the murder out of willful negligence is to be upheld, the causal relationship must be proved that passengers died because the crew members did not rescue them, although they were aware of the dangers of death the passengers faced.
The captain has denied the murder charges, saying that possible rescue steps were carried out during the sinking and that he had been rescued after no further rescue efforts were possible. Lee requested through his public lawyer that his charges be reviewed. The prosecution used video footage and communication logs between the ferry and the vessel control tower as evidence to back their case. And during the trial, there were some emotional moments with the prosecutor on the verge of tears at one point while reading the charges and some victims' families visibly shaken. 2 to 3 more of these trial sessions will be held with the next trial set for next Tuesday. The verdict is due out at least before November, when the arrest period for the crew members are terminated. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, the Seoul-Ho ferry disaster really highlighted the need for the cabinet reshuffle and reform drive. And there's something also that highlighted that drive is the collusive ties between the government and the industries they're meant to regulate. Now, changes have been promised, but efforts are facing resistance from some very powerful special interest groups. So JoongAng Daily explains.
Retired bureaucrats in Korea have long enjoyed the luxury of finding employment in firms and organizations that have direct links to their former posts. President Park Geun-hye's first choice for new Prime Minister An Dae-hee ran into trouble for that very reason, withdrawing his nomination last month after it was revealed he made some $1.5 million as a lawyer in less than 6 months, after retiring as a former Supreme Court justice. President Park has vowed to end the era of cozy ties between bureaucrats and the industries and companies they regulate, and has pledged reforms. But the changes are not coming easily. The revised Public Service Ethics Act of 2011 states that the government's Public Ethics Committee must screen any former high-ranking government official that wants to work at a company or public institution. But the act exempts lawyers, certified public accountants, and tax accountants from the screening process. There have been calls to close the loophole, but in a recent pre-announcement of revised legislation, the 3 groups are still exempt.
The government needs to submit the revised Public Service Ethics Act to the National Assembly so that we can deliberate on it and make changes to the necessary clauses.
Opposition party lawmakers on the Parliamentary Public Administration Committee say they have been trying to have the clause removed, only to be met with resistance from related interest groups. Although President Park had vocalized a strong will to end the close ties between the government and the industries they are meant to oversee, legislation that would impose greater restrictions on the practice remains in limbo. JoongAng, Arirang News.
South Korea and China have agreed to work with the United States to pressure North Korea to take practical steps to denuclearize. Meeting in Beijing on Tuesday, the chief nuclear envoys of South Korea and China held talks on ways to reopen the long-stalled 6-party denuclearization talks with North Korea. Park Geun-hye and his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei also discussed countermeasures in case Pyongyang conducts another nuclear test. Wrapping up the meeting, Hwang refused to comment on the prospects of the 6-party talks reopening any time in the near future. South Korean diplomats say Hwang's 2-day trip to Beijing is focused on ways to keep the nuclear dialogue going in the run-up to Chinese President Xi Jinping's expected visit to South Korea, which is expected either later this month or in early July.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, in some economic news, Korea's mounting household debt is threatening to stunt the nation's economic recovery. Household loans extended by local financial institutions hit a record high for the 3rd straight month. In April, the Bank of Korea said Tuesday that the figure stood at over $680 billion as of the end of the month, up nearly $5 billion from March. The central bank says the rise stems from strong home transactions, in fact, which topped 92,000 in April, which is an increase of 3,000 from a month earlier. Hundreds of credit card and banking executives here in Korea are facing disciplinary actions for mismanagement. The Financial Supervisory Service says 300 executives of large financial firms like KB Gungming Bank, Citibank and Shinhan Bank are being held accountable for various financial troubles at the institutions. The scope of the disciplinary action will be finalized on June 26th by a committee from Korea's financial watchdog, the FSS. It's expected to be the most wide-reaching case of its type ever in Korea's history. Now in tech news, LG's latest smartphone, the G3, is living up to its very substantial hype, and even then some, following its launch at the beginning of the month. The G3 has been flying off the shelves here in Korea, selling 100,000 units in just 5 days, and far outstripping even Samsung's flagship smartphone, the Galaxy S5. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
LG Electronics' newest G3 smartphone has garnered an explosive response from Korean customers, marking one of the best debuts yet for the electronic giant. Compared to the previous G2 model, the G3 doubled sales, with roughly 130,000 units purchased in a little over a week of its release. On the first day alone, over 14,000 smartphones were sold, whilst local and global competitor Samsung Electronics was only able to sell 7,500 of its Galaxy S5 smartphone. But what's behind the sudden surge for Korea's number 2 maker?
There are several reasons. First, the performance was enhanced with the UHD screen, and also the camera with laser point focus grabbed customers' attention. Secondly, Samsung's Galaxy S5 had lower than expected sales, while Apple's iPhone 6 will not come out until late in the third quarter. Lastly, the business suspensions for Korea's 3 major cell phone carriers were lifted, creating more sales.
U.S. information technology website GSM Arena ranked LG's G3 at the top of the list, beating out the likes of Samsung's Galaxy S5 and Sony's Xperia Z2. Other websites and magazines highly favored the G3's functions, especially the camera's definition and laser autofocus function. LG smartphone sales are ranked 3rd in the world, behind Apple and Samsung. But even with the hot release, experts say it won't be able to significantly reduce the sales gap with its top 2 competitors.
LG is expecting to sell over 10 million units overseas, but it will be hard to reduce the gap in the big 3 with just the G3 model, but it could be seen as a good starting point.
The G3 is scheduled to be released in 100 countries in late June. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea has given a German needle company the green light to open up a shop at the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex. Seoul's Unification Ministry announced on Tuesday that Gross Beckert submitted an application last week asking to supply needles to textile factories operating within the business park. It will mark the first time for a foreign company to do business at Kaesong. The ministry said 2 foreign manufacturers have also shown interest in opening up factories in Kaesong, but added that concerns about the stability of the factory zone is holding the companies back. South Korea early this week proposed a meeting with North Korean officials on June 19th to discuss the management of the Kaesong complex, but the request has so far gone unanswered. Now, Korean singer Psy is back, losing his gentleman status with his latest music video, Hangover, which features American rapper Snoop Dogg. The Korean singer has already racked up millions of views with his new video on YouTube. Shin Se-min reports.
14 million viewers and counting. In less than 1 day, Psy's new music video Hangover has certainly garnered interest on YouTube. It features Psy and American hip-hop artist Snoop Dogg delving into Korea's unique drinking culture and shows them visiting a singing room, drinking hangover remedies, visiting a sauna, and of course, downing soju and beer. Any success with this video will be judged against the one that broke Psy out as an international star in 2012. Since it was released, Gangnam Style has racked up over 2 billion views on YouTube, earning the title as the most watched clip of all time on the video sharing site. And according to the British magazine The Economist, the time spent by all of us watching that video could have been used for other pursuits. The time spent watching the 4-minute, 12-second video over 2 billion times equals 140 million hours or 16,000 years. Had Gangnam Style viewers not been watching the video, The Economist says they could have built 3 ships or constructed 20 Empire State Buildings. Will we be talking about Hangover in the same way in a few years? Only time will tell, but Psy isn't resting on his laurels. He will release another single called Daddy this summer. 신세민, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we are following this Wednesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning to you, Mark. Iraq's prime minister has asked his parliament for a state of emergency as militants believed to be part of ISIL, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, in their ongoing campaign of violence took control of the strategic northern province of Nineveh. Hundreds of fighters launched assaults on the provincial capital of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, taking control of the governor's headquarters and TV stations. The Associated Press reports they also freed about 1,400 prisoners from the city's jails. The former al-Qaeda affiliate wants an Islamic State in Iraq and Syria and took control of the western city of Fallujah earlier this year. The northern province is a major export route for Iraqi oil and a gateway to Syria. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also expressed his grave concern at the country's deteriorating security situation. Veteran hardliner politician Reuven Rivlin has been chosen as Israel's next president. Rivlin succeeds Nobel Peace Laureate Shimon Peres, who leaves the largely ceremonial post in July after 7 years as president. Unlike Peres, who used his post to advocate for peace with Palestinians, Rivlin is known to want a confederation with Palestine over an independent state, a view that puts him at odds with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A member of the ruling Likud party, Rivlin last month told the Times of Israel he would not intervene in the decisions of politicians if elected to the post. Pakistan has been rocked by another violent attack, this time near Jinnah International Airport in Karachi. The fierce gun battle erupted early Tuesday at the Airport Security Forces Academy. The training facility was under fire for about an hour by armed militants, while gunmen on motorbikes shot at police and soldiers. Military personnel have since secured the area and are searching for the attackers. The Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility for both attacks in Karachi this week. And with just 3 days to the 2014 Brazil World Cup, the threat of a transportation chaos still looms over São Paulo as subway workers announced they would vote to decide whether to resume their strike later this week. The decision would come just hours ahead of the tournament's first match to be played in São Paulo on Friday. Metro workers temporarily suspended the strike after entering their 5th day of protests. Meanwhile, 1 worker was killed and 2 others hurt in a construction accident at a monorail meant to expand the city's metro network.
And good morning to you all as we kick things off with the South Korean national football team. Now, after the Taeguk Warriors lost to Ghana 4-0 in their final tune-up match, things are looking pretty bleak for the team going into the Brazil World Cup. And it looks like their defense continues to be an issue for the South Korean side as they gave up 4 goals to the Ghana squad who didn't even play full force. This, of course, including the hat-trick scored by Andre Ayew, and seems like the defense is lacking communication in the backfield, with many of the defenders losing their marked men. Not only that, Korea had more shots in the match, but still failed to score, meaning the offense lacks that finishing touch, with the team facing problems from defense to offense. But still a week away till their first match against Russia. And now over to some Tuesday night's KBO action. The Hanwha Eagles rally back big to beat the Kia Tigers in a slugfest 16-15 with the NC Dinos, beating the Doosan Bears 8-4 and the Samsung Lions and the Nexen Heroes draw 5-5, with Park Geun-hye hitting his 27th home run of the season. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the LG Twins take on the Lotte Giants. And of course, going into the game here, second inning, Choi You-sun with an infield single to third base to scores Lee Byung-gyu, and it's 1-0 LG. Bottom of the inning, Kang Min-ho at bat, and there it goes to straightaway center field. Gone, a solo shot ties the game 1-1. We go over to the 6th inning of the game. Chung Hee-yoon at bat, and a pass ball scores Park Kyung-soo, and LG takes the lead 2-1. Bottom of the 6th, Hwang Jae-gyun drills this ball to deep left field. Back, and gone, and we're tied once again 2-2. 7th inning, men on second and third. Park Yong-taek with a clutch single here to left center field, scoring 2 runners as LG takes the lead 4-2. Next play, Lee Jin-young an RBI single to right, making it 5-2 as the LG Twins would hang on to win this game 5-2, your final score. And now moving over to the NBA, where the $2 billion sales of the Los Angeles Clippers came to a halt after Donald Sterling opted to sue the NBA instead. While Sterling's wife negotiated a deal with former CEO of Microsoft Steve Ballmer to sell the team for $2 billion, Donald Sterling has stated in a one-page statement saying that he will not sell the team and instead sue the league for $1 billion. The lawsuit states that the NBA violated his constitutional rights by relying on information from an illegal recording. And now finishing things off with Game 3 of the NHL Stanley Cup Final between the LA Kings and the New York Rangers. Now, despite the Rangers coming back home to Madison Square Garden, the Kings still took a 3-0 series lead. Of course, the Rangers trying to use the home crowd momentum here, but the offense comes up empty against the Kings goaltender Jonathan Quick, who saved all 32 shots made by the Rangers. Meanwhile, Jeff Carter, Jake Muzzin, and Mike Richards scored for the Kings, giving them a 3-0 victory and a 3-0 series lead. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning, I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your weather updates. Well, hope thunder and lightning didn't keep you awake last night. I mean, what a lousy day we had yesterday here in Seoul. Well, today seems to be a repeat of yesterday's weather forecast. Mostly cloudy skies are here to kick off the day. Then there should be passing showers in the afternoon. The precipitation should be similar to yesterday, somewhere between 5 to 40 millimeters. And highs today will reach into the mid-20s, so it seems like temperatures will be similar to a tad lower than yesterday. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The low in Seoul is starting out at 19 and the high will rise to 26, while Daegu tops out at 25 and Gwangju and Busan should climb to 27 and 23 later on. For other regions, down on Jeju should see a high of 23. Daejeon and Dokdo will reach 27 and 17 respectively, while Mount Keungang tops out at 15. Well, that's all for now. Have a wonderful day, and I'll be back with more updates after 10.
Thank you very much, Jion. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in 30 minutes' time, and we'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.